When someone who feels everything finally stops absorbing and starts reflecting, they don't become cold. They become what systems of manipulation fear most: discerning, not cruel, but clear, not hardened, but awakened. Carl Jung spent his life documenting what happens when sensitive souls stop betraying themselves to keep others comfortable, and the transformation is more radical than anyone expects. Picture this moment. You've spent years being the emotional translator, the peacekeeper, the one who senses the room's temperature before anyone speaks. You pride yourself on understanding what others feel, sometimes before they feel it themselves. You've shaped your entire identity around this sensitivity, this gift of emotional perception. But something different happens this time. Someone takes advantage of your understanding, again. They weaponize your sensitivity, knowing you'll excuse their behavior because you can feel their pain. And in that moment, instead of the familiar cycle of absorption, excuse, and depletion, a different question surfaces. What if my ability to feel everything wasn't meant to make me responsible for everything? That question is what Jung's work on individuation was truly about. The dangerous journey of becoming who you actually are, rather than who others need you to be. Here's the uncomfortable truth that no one tells people with heightened sensitivity. Your gift was probably born from necessity, not nature. Or more accurately, your natural sensitivity became exaggerated as a survival mechanism. Jung observed throughout his clinical work that many of his most perceptive patients had developed their emotional radar in childhood environments where reading the room meant staying safe. In his work on psychological types and the development of consciousness, he noted that extreme sensitivity often develops as what I call survival sensitivity. The ability to detect emotional shifts became a matter of psychological survival. In his book, Psychological Types, Jung wrote about how certain individuals develop what he termed feeling function to an extraordinary degree, often as compensation for threatening environments. This isn't about pathologizing sensitivity. It's about understanding its roots. What happens in many cases is this: a child in an unpredictable environment, whether volatile, emotionally manipulative, or simply inconsistent, learns to read micro-expressions, tonal shifts, energy changes. They become masters at detecting what adults around them need, feel, or might do next. This sensitivity gets praised. You're so understanding. You're so mature. You're such a good listener. And here's where the trap closes. That survival skill becomes your identity. Your worth becomes tied to your ability to manage other people's emotional states. You mistake your hypervigilance for compassion, your people-pleasing for kindness, your self-abandonment for love. Let me tell you what really happens when someone with this pattern finally sees the truth. Everything they thought was their strength reveals itself as a cage they built, one understanding smile at a time. This is where Jung's concept of the shadow becomes revolutionary. Most people think the shadow is made of our bad qualities, our anger, selfishness, or aggression. But Jung discovered something far more unsettling. For highly sensitive people, the shadow often contains their strength, their boundaries, their sacred no. In Ion, Jung explained that the shadow holds everything we've repressed to maintain our persona, our social mask. For someone whose persona is the understanding one, the giver, the emotional sponge, their shadow contains something radical: self-preservation, discernment, and the capacity to let others sit in their own discomfort. The shadow holds your unexpressed rage at being used, your suppressed knowledge that you can read people because you've had to, not because you're obligated to serve them, your hidden understanding that some people don't want to heal. They want an audience for their pain, and they've cast you in that role. This is what Jung called the work of individuation, meeting and integrating these rejected aspects of yourself. And when people with deep sensitivity finally meet their shadow, when they finally encounter their own healthy selfishness, their boundaries, their clarity, the transformation isn't gentle. It's volcanic. When they finally meet this shadow, everything shifts, and the world around them starts calling it dangerous. Here are the 8 signs that someone with heightened sensitivity has begun the dangerous work of seeing truth. First sign, the energetic withdrawal. This is what I call conscious conservation. You stop being emotionally available on demand. Where you once felt compelled to respond immediately to every emotional bid, every crisis, every "I need to talk," you suddenly discover space. Jung described this in his work on psychic energy. The psyche naturally seeks balance, and when energy has flowed outward compulsively for years, the individuation process creates a pulling back, not from cruelty, but from necessity. Your soul is reclaiming resources. What this looks like: you stop texting back immediately. You let calls go to voicemail. You say, "I'm not available tonight," without elaborate explanations. People accustomed to your unlimited accessibility will call this coldness. It's not. It's the beginning of self-respect. If you felt guilty about pulling back your energy, comment, "My energy is mine to manage." Second sign, the lie detector activates. Your sensitivity, once used to excuse and understand, now becomes a precision instrument for detecting manipulation. You start noticing patterns you previously explained away. The sob story that comes out right when they need something. The crisis that emerges every time you set a boundary. The pain they share that somehow always makes their bad behavior your responsibility to absorb. Jung observed that as individuals integrate their shadow, including their own capacity for manipulation, they become remarkably skilled at recognizing it in others. You can't con someone who's met their own shadow. They know all the moves because they've unconsciously used them too. This doesn't make you cynical, it makes you clear. You stop accepting the story and start watching the pattern. You realize that understanding why someone hurts you doesn't obligate you to keep letting them do it. Third sign, the empathy shift. Here's what's truly remarkable. Your empathy doesn't disappear. It transforms from an undifferentiated merging into what Jung would call conscious compassion. You can still feel what others feel, but you no longer mistake their feelings for your responsibility. In his work on psychological boundaries, Jung distinguished between participation mystique, unconscious identification with others, and genuine compassion, understanding while maintaining self. You move from the former to the latter. You feel their pain and you let them have it. You understand their struggle and you refuse to fix it. You recognize their patterns and you don't interrupt their lessons. This is the empathy that systems hate because it can't be weaponized. Fourth sign, the mask falls away. Your persona, the carefully constructed, good person who's always understanding, begins to crack. You stop performing emotional availability. You stop smiling when you're not happy. You stop nodding along when you disagree. Jung wrote extensively about the persona, death in the individuation process. He said, "The psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. Your true self has been unconscious, kept out of view. Now it demands emergence, and the mask can no longer contain it. People will say, 'You've changed,' and they'll say it like an accusation. They're right. You have changed. You've stopped being who they needed and started being who you are. If people have told you, 'You're not the person I knew,' comment, 'I was never who you needed me to be.'" Fifth sign, the anger arrives. This might be the most shocking sign. You get angry. Not the passive-aggressive kind you might have expressed before, but clean, clear anger. Anger at the years of self-betrayal. Anger at the people who knew they were using you. Anger at yourself for allowing it. Jung believed anger in previously passive people was a sign of psychological health, not pathology. In The Development of Personality, he wrote about how the emergence of previously repressed emotions signals the integration of shadow material. Your anger is your shadow saying, "I matter, my needs matter. This was never okay." This anger feels dangerous because you've been taught that angry people are bad people, especially if you're a woman or socialized as one. But Jung distinguished between shadow integration and shadow possession. You're not becoming your anger, you're finally allowing yourself to feel it, which paradoxically gives you mastery over it. Sixth sign, the relationship purge. Jung called this the sorting. Relationships that relied on your self-abandonment begin to fall away. Some people will leave because you're no longer useful to them. Others you'll release because you finally see the dynamic clearly. This isn't about becoming isolated. It's about what Jung termed conscious relationship. You begin to distinguish between people who love your sensitivity and people who exploit it, people who appreciate your understanding and people who weaponize it, people who reciprocate and people who extract. Authentic connections deepen during this phase because they were never based on your performance. Exploitative ones end because they had no other foundation. The pain of loss is real, but it's grief for the fantasy, not the reality. Seventh sign, physical reclamation. Your body, which may have carried the weight of this emotional labor for years, begins to speak. Chronic tension releases. Mystery ailments that doctors couldn't explain start to resolve. Fatigue lifts. You realize how much physical energy it took to maintain those patterns. Jung understood psychosomatic illness before it was widely accepted. He noted that psychological conflicts the conscious mind won't address often manifest as physical symptoms. As you integrate your truth, your body stops having to shout it through pain. The final sign is, the power consolidates. What I call sovereign sensitivity emerges. You still feel deeply, but now you feel with boundaries. You still understand people, but you understand yourself first. You still offer compassion, but not at the cost of self-betrayal. Jung's concept of the individuated self is precisely this. Not the death of connection, but connection from wholeness rather than woundedness. You're no longer sensitive because you're trying to survive. You're sensitive because it's part of your nature. And now, you're choosing how to use it. If you've reached this phase, comment, "I choose my sensitivity now." Let me be honest, this transformation isn't comfortable. Jung didn't call it the night sea journey because it's a pleasant cruise. He borrowed this phrase from mythology because this process feels like drowning before you learn to breathe underwater. You might lose relationships you thought were foundational. You might discover that people you loved were more attached to your function than your person. You might face periods of profound loneliness as you release old patterns but haven't yet attracted new connections. Jung observed that individuation requires what he called a descent. In his work on alchemy and transformation, he noted that the tree of life must send its roots as deep as hell before its branches can reach heaven. Your shadow work, your boundary setting, your refusal to perform. This is the descent. It feels like a loss because it is a loss, the death of who you pretended to be. But this grief, Jung insisted, is sacred. It's the necessary destruction that precedes authentic creation. Here's what happens in your actual practical life. The relationships draining your energy were also draining your resources. The people-pleasing costs you opportunities. The compulsive understanding kept you in situations that damaged you. As you transform, practical benefits follow. You have energy for your own goals. You stop funding other people's dysfunction, emotionally or financially. You make decisions based on your actual needs rather than others' expectations. Your life begins to reflect your values because you're no longer performing someone else's script. Jung believed psychological integration manifests in concrete reality. As above, so below. Your internal transformation reshapes your external world. Your relationships don't end. They evolve or reveal themselves. What I call the conscious sorting isn't about becoming isolated. It's about getting honest. Healthy relationships adjust. People who actually care about you will respect your boundaries, even if they're confused at first. They'll say, "I notice you're different. Help me understand." They'll work with you, not against you. Unhealthy relationships will fight your transformation. They'll call you selfish, cold, not yourself. They'll tell you therapy is making you mean or you're being influenced by bad people. This is how you know the relationship was based on your compliance, not your personhood. Jung wrote in Modern Man in Search of a Soul, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Real relationships allow mutual transformation. Extractive ones demand you stay fixed in place." So what is the final form of this dangerous transformation? It's what I call conscious sensitivity. And it's a superpower that makes you genuinely threatening to systems built on manipulation. Your sensitivity isn't lost, it's refined. You still read people, but now you trust what you read instead of explaining it away. You still feel deeply, but you distinguish between empathy and enmeshment. You still care, but you've accepted that caring doesn't mean fixing. Jung's individuated person isn't isolated, they're integrated. They've made peace with their light and their shadow. For someone with heightened sensitivity, this means the 5 principles of conscious sensitivity. 1. I feel your pain and I let you have it. Understanding someone's struggle doesn't obligate you to resolve it. 2. I trust my perceptions, even when they're uncomfortable. Your sensitivity is data. Stop dismissing what you sense. 3. My boundaries protect my gifts. Walls keep everyone out. Boundaries keep the right people in and the wrong people at a healthy distance. 4. Compassion includes self-compassion. You're part of all beings deserving of kindness. 5. My sensitivity serves my truth first. Then, from that fullness, you choose how to serve others. This integrated state is what makes you dangerous, not because you're harmful, but because you can no longer be manipulated. You can see through the performance. You recognize emotional blackmail. You won't sacrifice yourself to keep a system comfortable. People will call this selfishness. Let them. Jung distinguished between ego inflation, destructive narcissism, and healthy ego development, necessary self-regard. You're not becoming a narcissist when you start honoring your needs. You're becoming a person. Society, especially systems built on caregiving, emotional labor, and sensitivity without boundaries, will resist your transformation. That's how you know you're onto something real. As Jung noted, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Your complete self includes the part that says no, the part that walks away, the part that chooses you. Reclaim it. So here's what I want you to understand. Your sensitivity is not your weakness. It's your navigation system, but only when you're steering your own ship. Your empathy is not an obligation to absorb. It's a gift you offer consciously, not a service you provide compulsively. Your boundaries are not cruelty. They're the container that makes your compassion sustainable. Jung spent his lifetime validating this path. He insisted that becoming whole requires integrating everything you've rejected about yourself, including your right to choose where your energy goes. He knew this journey would be resisted, misunderstood, and labeled dangerous by those who benefit from your self-betrayal. But he also knew it was the only path to authentic life. Trust the process. Trust your anger. It's pointing toward violated boundaries. Trust your exhaustion. It's telling you something is unsustainable. Trust your desire to withdraw. It's reclamation, not isolation. If this resonates, comment, "I am dangerous because I am finally awake." Remember the question that started this. What if your ability to feel everything wasn't meant to make you responsible for everything? You have your answer now. Your sensitivity was meant to guide you toward truth, your truth, not to make you a repository for everyone else's emotional chaos. They don't call you dangerous because you're harmful. They call you dangerous because you've stopped betraying yourself, because you see clearly, because you can't be used anymore. That's not a flaw. That's your freedom. And here's the real truth. When sensitive people stop people-pleasing and start truth-seeing, they don't become harsh. They become discerning. They don't become cold. They become clear. They don't become selfish. They become whole. If you're ready to explore what happens when you integrate your shadow and stop performing emotional availability, watch my video on the dark side of being the good person everyone loves. It's the natural next step in this journey. Your journey from unconscious sensitivity to conscious sovereignty isn't just personal transformation. It's revolutionary. You're not just changing yourself. You're refusing to participate in systems that require your self-abandonment. That makes you dangerous in the best possible way. Thanks for staying with me through